Hey everybody, welcome to part two of the first podcast for these authentic conversations that we're having. My name is Laura Wedemeyer, and I am a single mom, widowed, and now in my mid 60s, joining friends that I've had for decades in conversations that I feel are so important. These amazing people are journeying through life, and I have just been privileged to talk to them about what they're learning, how they're growing. And today we're going to be going into part two with talking to my friend Kim Aoyama and her recent almost year journey that she's been on. If you did not hear part one, go back to part one, and this will be the end of our conversation today. So let me invite Kim on here now. And here we go. So glad we can do this. All right.
Oh, dear. Whenever
Okay.
I log on, I've always got to go through all these, turn the camera on, turn the audio on. I don't know. I'm not a Zoom expert, so
I know,
I
right?
managed to get through somehow. But anyway, I,
Well, I just wanted to make sure that we had enough time for you to tell the full story. So thank you for coming back with me
sure.
to this part two. And I think we left off. Well, you were beginning to tell us the benefits of going through all of this, and you had just talked about going through a 12-step program. Did you finish that 12-step program, or are you still in it?
No, so the program that I went to was faith-based at a local church. Fabulous, fabulous program. If you guys ever hear about the regeneration program,
Okay.
it's branded nationwide, different churches and different, so you can go on regeneration and look. But what had happened is my coach, and as we were working along with things, she said, I think that you need to do some recovery work, so let's get you in this program. And thankfully she never tried to be a therapist. She knows her role, and so she's like, you need all these different
Yeah.
practitioners to come in. So she sent me to regen, and I loved regen until and then stayed with it for about 7, maybe 8 months, and all of a sudden we got to the inventory portion where you have to get in and you have to really write down, who did I harm? Who harmed me? Who am I carrying bitterness against?
Wow.
What were all these things that happened? And I started falling apart like a cheap suit. I mean, I would have panic
Oh,
attacks, and like I said, I'm not a drama queen, but it just got to the point where it's like I sat down to try to do it and force myself to do it, and I would just start crying. And there was just a lot. I had lots of marriage, like hurt. I shouldn't say this publicly, but lots of hurts in my marriage. Who doesn't?
right.
And there were
I,
a lot of, right? I mean,
yeah.
we all did. Anybody that's ever
We
been
all
married
do.
experiences
Yeah.
hurt,
Two
but
people, that
right,
equals
right.
possibility of hurt.
So there were, yeah. So anyway, I just fell apart, and I was talking with Dawn about it, and she said, I really think you're probably looking at trauma. And I just said, she said, you need to get some trauma therapy. This is different than regen. Regen is a completely
Wow.
different thing. And so I went and I talked with the doc. And actually, I had actually stumbled upon a girl. I think she has the funniest name online, but I found this woman on a YouTube channel called Crappy Childhood Fairy. And
Oh,
that was her name. But she was talking all about complex PTSD.
okay.
And talking about when, and a lot of it is childhood or it's complex, and it's basically a whole bunch of trauma all at once, so much that your brain
Yes.
can't really
Yeah.
process it the way that and that was what I
Right.
went through, Glenn dying and all the stuff that ensued afterwards. And I recognized all of the symptoms, and she starts talking. I'm like, oh my word, I've got this complex PTSD thing. That's exactly what it sounds like, which is all trauma.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going and started getting therapy. I went for a 3-day intensive with a counselor, and it was amazing. She used EMDR. I found
Yeah.
another body work. I found this other gal that my coach turned me on to that was doing the somatic body work and listening to my body talk. So I
Yeah.
had all these different practitioners that started coming in, but the bottom line is that I decided to tell the leaders at Regen really wanted me to stay on. And I just said to them, I'm trying to be on this journey of figuring out how to rest, and I can't do both. I know myself. I'm that critical right now. So I can't stay in this program that's making me dig up stuff when I'm panicking about digging up stuff. So I told them I'll be back. And I
Yeah.
plan to. I'm actually looking at rejoining it because I really want to start the program over again. But I said I'll be back and this time I'll go all the way through. So I stepped out and started getting really intense trauma therapy. And to me,
Mm.
it was the best choice I could have made
Wow.
because I was able to really go through and start, getting the trauma put. The interesting thing, I found out so much about trauma, which was really cool. But one of the things that they talk about is it has to do with the amygdala. You know probably a lot
Yeah.
about this stuff,
Yeah.
but how sometimes trauma happens, and the problem that'll happen is because there's so much going on. And again, you know all this stuff that I don't know about it, but you will have certain events that continue to stay in the forefront of your mind and continue to trigger you and continue to give you re-traumatize you and re-victimize you over and over and over again because your brain never got a chance to process it properly and put it back in the past where it belongs.
Right. Yes.
And so
Yeah.
EMDR helps you do that. There's all
Yeah.
these therapies. And I realized that I still had a lot of trauma in the forefront. And so when I went
Okay.
and had this intensive and we went through this one session, I was able to tell that story of everything that happened after my husband died, the real traumatic stuff. I was actually able in 1 2 hour session to tell that story as a victim
Oh,
and process it and put it in the past. I'd never told the story as a victim. I'd always told the story as an idiot who stumbled into it. And I
really?
told the story as a victim, and then it found its place in the past. And I literally got up and said, "Oh my word, I feel free. I can literally," because I gave my brain that ability to process it where it needed to be processed to put it in the past. And I don't, like I said, I probably just, you could have a
Mm.
psychiatrist listen to this stuff and tell me that I'm nuts, but all I knew is I left
No.
there free from that story because I was able to put the trauma where it belonged, which was in the past.
How did you switch it from the to be the person that was victimized? Did that help? Was that just something that your trauma therapist helped you
My therapist
bring?
helped me with it. I was able to start seeing areas. She started helping me see areas where I had truly been victimized,
Okay.
and I
So you
began to
didn't
have,
have to carry what happened anymore. You knew it had been done to you instead of
right.
you somehow conjured this up or made
Well,
it happen.
being the good, responsible Christian that I was, I wanted to own my own stuff. I wanted
Yeah.
to own what I had done wrong and own my part of it and all.
Yeah.
And I always looked at it like, okay, I was a broken person. I had an orphan complex.
Yeah.
I didn't have my identity was so messed up. Like I would give excuses for why I
Yeah.
did it or why I allowed it all to happen. And this time I was able to look at it and say, no, there were people that actually were looking to harm you for their good. They came in to manipulate and abuse you for their good. And she was
Abuse
able to help
me.
me see that.
You're saying
Yeah,
it to yourself.
they
Yeah,
were
you had to.
predators. They came in, they saw a woman that had um a lot of orphan issues and they said, "Oh, she's an easy one to use." And
Did
they
you have
came
to
in.
like do some forgiveness or do
Well,
were
thankfully, I knew enough as a believer right after everything blew up and I was in pieces on the ground, I knew that I couldn't not forgive them because I didn't want bitterness to take root and
yeah.
turn me into an old crow.
Yeah.
So I had this season right after it all happened where, and I'll be brief on this, but I would be with my face on the ground and I'd say, okay, Lord, I need you to give me a scripture, give me a script. And I would do the flop method. I'd just literally do the flop and just or I'd hear Zechariah 5 or what, like I'd hear these names, in my
Yeah.
head. And I
Yeah.
would look them up, and invariably, this probably happened a half a dozen times. Invariably, within the first 3 or 4 verses of wherever he sent me,
Yeah.
there was a verse about the justice of God.
Oh,
And
good.
he
Yeah.
was letting me
Yeah.
know, I am a God of justice. I need you to know that I saw what happened to you. You
Hmm.
were a vulnerable widow, and I saw what happened to you, and I will take care of things. And so at that point, I'm like, I don't think I want these guys to have to undergo the kind of, so I started praying for them and forgiving it. But I really did that act of forgiveness early on because I knew that it would, that if I didn't, that it would lead to bitterness. But I didn't understand. Like I did all the work that I could think of to get past that grief and the loss and everything, but I didn't realize how much trauma will log itself into your brain until it's dealt with effectively.
Yeah.
I carried the trauma with me and became a shell of my. I was even diagnosed with bipolar, if you can believe it, and I was on bipolar meds for a while.
I
Just
know. I
because of
actually
all,
knew that, but that
remember?
wasn't really what was wrong. It was grief.
It was great. It was complex
It
grief.
was
It was CP
complex grief. I remember when you
and
told me that,
PTSD.
and I was like, okay, let's just stop here for a second.
I was on meds for
Because
4 or 5 years of meds.
yeah, I remember, Kim, when you told me that, I was like, this is such revelation. I really want people that are listening to this who know people who are struggling with quote unquote bipolar, that there is every chance that they could be in complex grief. I think you
Yeah,
know that.
complex PTSD is really what it was.
Okay,
You
complex
can call it
PTSD.
complex grief, but it's complex trauma. It's
Okay.
just so much
Oh
trauma that
my
happens
gosh.
that,
And it
and they, and
manifests like
right,
this for
right.
you.
Yeah. It
Well, and it
manifested
was
as highs and
extreme.
lows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember this.
I wasn't the kind of manic that would, you know, go run down to the car dealership and try to qualify for a Porsche.
Or
You
torch the Tesla dealership.
or torch the Tesla dealership or anything. Like I wasn't so manic that I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go buy whatever. I'm gonna go buy this mansion or anything nuts or you know what I'm saying? Nothing but I did have those depressive swings where um I laid in bed for like a whole month and watched like don't laugh. I watched you
Don't laugh.
I watched like 9 seasons of Criminal Minds in about a month and a half, just laying in bed all day long because I couldn't function because I couldn't leave the house.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't cook for myself. I couldn't, and I started realizing that like clinical depression doesn't necessarily mean you're sad. Sometimes it just means that you're like literally physically incapable of doing basic functions like going up and down the stairs. It's so overwhelming that you'd rather sit in a
Yeah.
chair. So there's all these things that go with it, but
Well, I just want to say
anyway, it's been a long journey, so I know we're off on
yeah, but
out.
before we leave that one point, and then we'll circle back.
Sure.
I work with the homeless here in Reading. It's a big part of what I do here. And I have said so many times that if people on the streets who have been displaced can get through grief, the grief they're carrying, I have a feeling that they could function and have a home and have a life and have a job and have a family.
Mhm.
And I think you would agree with me that that is like what I've been exposed to in the last, 4 or 5 years in this work. And I'm not a counselor or a professional, just where God's led me in all of this with the homeless. I keep thinking, their addictions have everything to do with this unresolved grief, or
Mhm.
like you said, the trauma,
Trauma.
and then the diagnoses that they get the medication for
Hmm.
is really, like you said, not necessarily helpful or necessary. It's not
Yeah,
really what's really going on.
yeah, and the medicine that I was on, I was on a really light dose, and so I thought I was fine, but I realized after a while, it's like a lot of those SSDI, the
Yeah,
antidepressants,
yeah, yeah,
is that it puts you in a mood range like this,
yeah,
you know? And Kim was created to be like this.
yeah.
You
Like no
know, back in college,
color.
I was,
Yeah, you're
you know,
extravagantly
just
colorful, and you were like
pure.
on this
Yeah, and I was
range
on
of
this little
zero
spectrum
color.
of this was my emotional range for
Yeah,
years because of the meds, and I finally got to it was like I can't anyway.
that's not me. Yeah,
So I think I would summer like with all of the conversations, all these different ones that we're talking about with trauma thing, I guess I would probably have to say this was years of me just stumbling through and trying to figure out stuff and going through different therapies and trying
yeah,
different
yeah,
things and different ways. I finally got off those meds and then I found a counselor that said I had complex grief. But I did a little EMDR with her and then
yeah.
I did all these different therapies, but I think that now we're in this day and age now where I think in the last 10 years, the work of trauma therapy has come so far, and the understanding of how to treat trauma and how to
Yeah.
get people back on is so much better than it was even a dozen years ago when I was desperate and didn't know anything. And
Right.
I was just trying, but I was always on a journey to get better,
Yeah.
always on a journey. And that was why when I did that thing of not going to church,
Yeah.
for me, it was just the next step in a journey.
Yeah.
Uh, I've tried the bipolar meds. I've tried this EMDR. I've done this thing. I've done that thing. And so it's like, oh, now it's a stage where I don't go to church for a while.
Yeah.
It was another step in me going, okay, I'm stepping out because I have enough of experience of saying, okay, God, I'm going out in this direction now. Okay, now I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
So it was a natural progression for all of that.
And honestly, the whole thing is like you're trying to uncover the real Kim. Somewhere the real Kim got buried in all this junk that is not was not meant to happen to you. To you. We can say the word to now.
Mm-hmm.
It's, and you were so brave to continue to just fight your way through and get to the real person that God intended you to be. And I
Right.
just want to kind of transition now into like, you're out of church, you've faced the awkwardness of this. You said to me in a conversation that we had that it just was so, like, so hard, so out of your element, so awkward, the feelings that you had just like staying home on a Sunday morning. But what's that turned into now for you on a Sunday morning, or what does that look like now for you? It's not, I don't think it's like that anymore. I think that's what you told me. It doesn't feel awkward. It might feel, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it might feel refreshing.
I met with my coach last week, or maybe it was a week before that, and I was talking with her about it, and I just said, I think I've just finally realized, because this entire time I've been gone, there's always been the thought in the back of my mind is when do I get better so I can go back to church?
Oh,
And I think my coach has had this ongoing dialogue with me for a year now, just saying, you need to open your mind and expand your horizon to what church is.
okay.
What is church? Like for young families, I think going to a brick and mortar and having Sunday school class taught and having,
Yeah.
it's such an important element of young family life, you know. But if you're a 60-year-old woman, what does church look like? Is church not just being in community with other believers on a regular basis? Does that have to be a Sunday morning
Uh-huh.
with, with a church format? Like the formats in churches now are not what I grew up with. And I realized that I really loved what I grew up with. What I grew up with was small Nazarene churches where there were offertories while the offering was being given, and all the little kids would get up there with their flute
Oh,
or with their Bible reading, and you had people standing up and doing testimonies, and there was this real collaboration among community
yeah.
where you just there was always an expression of people in the community on the platform doing things, and there
Yeah.
was this whole mode, and so now this mode that you most of the churches are doing now is just you go in, there's three songs, and some announcements and a sermon, but those community elements aren't brought up anymore because it doesn't fit the format, and there's a side of me that goes, I get more emotionally now, I think, out of being in a community, in a prayer night with a small group of people in a home, and I'm not the only
Yes.
one. This
So
is all
beautiful.
part of this deconstruction is people saying my spiritual life needs to be more than a morning church setting. So I long to go back into the Sunday morning setting, but I just said to my coach a couple weeks ago, I think I just realized that my happiest church experiences have been going to a church on a Sunday night, which Studio started out as.
Right.
And then they
Yeah.
moved to morning, as most churches
Yeah.
invariably do, because it serves the families, which I
Yeah.
understand. That's where you go where the favor and the families are so critical. So so I look at it and I go, I don't think I ever want to go to church on a Sunday morning ever again. And I was talking to a friend and she mentioned that there was like a church service. She goes to a church that has a Thursday night service. I'm like, there's a church that has a
Wow.
Thursday night service? I'm like, sign me up, you know. In the meantime, like if I go back to Regen is like there's like 300 or 400 people in this room and they do a couple worship songs and you've never heard worship. Like
Wow.
you've heard in a room of people that know where they came from and know what they've
Yes,
been
I
freed from.
know. I know. I
And so
know.
these
Yep.
Regen and those faith-based recovery programs, man, those
I
people
know.
know what they've been saved from and they're in it.
I
So
know. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
So I'm just rethinking what it looks like to go to church because I long to go back to church and I long for things to go quote unquote back to normal, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I just don't know what it looks like right now.
Yeah. And
I'm
one
not
thing,
quite there yet.
yeah, that's fine. Another thing you mentioned to me was that being a worship leader, you were just starting
Oh, I
to.
have so much to say about that.
I know. I can't wait to talk to you again. I know it's going to happen again. We'll have another conversation and we'll think, oh, we need to let some people in on this too. But being a worship leader, which of course is my background too,
Mhm.
you casually mentioned that you just now have started listening to worship music just recently again. Was it painful? Was it awkward? Did it
Yeah,
bring
I had
that
to let go
pious
a
shame
lot of,
woman back in?
well, I haven't let her back in yet.
Good.
So, yeah, no. So, but a lot of my church hurt had to do with my experience on worship teams
Yeah,
and especially transitioning as being like a 50 or 55 or 60-year-old woman on a
right,
team with a whole bunch of 25-year-old kids and they talk, "Oh, we're
right.
gonna have a great community here." And it's like those kids are never going to call me for community. you
I
know
know. Again, my friend
there's
can
a
be
whole
brave.
there's a whole you're brave and I'm like this 56-year-old woman getting up there learning. I mean, I got the software. I sat under some great people at Bethel that taught me how to
Yep,
do all the swirly swirls and I got
I
all the
know.
technology and I'm like I was doing what I was supposed to do and whatever, but I think it was just years of saying as a really anointed worship leader and now the only place that I can find because of my warped identity is to play keyboards and keep my voice silent.
I
And
know.
that was
I
me. That
now
was
I
never
must
my
say to everybody, I was present in your life during all of this. I was watching all this go on. And I
yeah,
had my own opinions and thoughts on the sidelines because of my own
right,
background, and I could do my own podcast on this. But
right.
I so track with you on this. I so
And
feel
and,
you
and
on this.
I think that I mean one of my big heroes, and you and I probably both is Rita Springer because she's
Yeah.
just bucked all the convention, bucked it all.
Yeah, love her.
But I want to clarify and say every worship leader I've ever had has been pure of heart.
Yes. Uh-huh.
They've been pure of heart. They've always said, "We love you. We want what you bring." Especially at Studio Riva, at Studio was always like, "Kim, I want you to bring who you are as a pianist." And when I
Amen.
said to her, "I'd like to maybe sing sometimes," she was never said no. She always said, "Yes, let's move you in that direction." It was me and my
Okay.
identity crisis and my falling apart inside and
Yes.
all the hurts and all those traumas and everything, I didn't let myself go there because I knew it was too vulnerable of a place.
Right.
But anyway, I don't know. What are we talking about? What was the question?
Just that you decided to let worship music back in
Yeah.
and just that
So
transition.
yeah, part of cutting off that thing was realizing that for me to listen to, a Brandon Lake song or Elevation or one of the stuff that I loved
Yeah.
just stirred up so many things and it's so easy to get into a mode listening to how they're playing and then there's comparison and there's all and I was like I can't listen to worship music right now. That was early on and so I downloaded like these little Clare sisters of Arundel. They were this little like Gregorian
Uh-huh.
little nuns and I would just listen to Gregorian chants and I would just
Wow.
listen to these little sisters of the poor, the most
Wow.
beautiful, beautiful orchestrated music with these nuns just singing these songs. And the great thing about it was that I didn't know what any of the words meant.
Okay.
And I was like, oh,
Yes.
I could actually do that. And that was what my brain needed to be able to know.
How
So just
smart.
recently, I've started to go back to worship music and listen to it, but I'm always listening to it with that understanding of I've seen both sides of it, the dark and the light. I've seen the flat side of the worship business and the beautiful anointed side. And I always know when I listen to it, I'm like, I'm just going for what the words are saying, and I'm just looking for the good spirits side of it. Um, but I don't know where I fit. I just last week, for the first time, sat back down at the piano and started playing again and singing.
Wow.
And that was
What
huge. I haven't
was
done that in a year.
what was that like for you?
I just decided not to complicate it, not to go there mentally and start
Yeah.
putting all the labels on it. I just wanted to sing to God. So I started singing that Agnes, I don't know how anybody ever says that word, Agnes Dei.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. That one.
Yeah.
And I just started singing it out. My voice, man, it just doesn't, it's so out of repair right now. I
Yeah.
can't-
Yeah.
But then at my birthday party, at my 60th birthday party, we had a little potluck, it was super fun. And right before we prayed for the meal, I said, I want to sing to you guys. And I just started singing,
Oh,
all my life you have been faithful. And we all started singing along, and the Holy Spirit just fell. And I just sensed that anointing again.
oh
It was
yeah.
just this song this long, but it was like, it's still there. Your heart of worship is still there. You just got lost in it for a while, but it doesn't mean that it's not there, and it doesn't mean that it's not a beautiful gift,
And I just
that
think
warms
when
the
you're
heart of
saying
God.
that, the verse that says the gifts of God are without repentance and that they linger with us through our life through the ups and the downs. And
Yeah.
maybe your voice has just taken and like mine too. I feel like mine is in disrepair as well, and for for other reasons because of GERD and other things that I've gone through. But I feel like it's still there, you know, to be unleashed at the appropriate time for the Lord to let other things take precedence. Like, I think I just applaud you that you would just give yourself time and not necessarily freak out that it's been a year or oh my gosh or who am I? Yeah.
I have to keep going. I have to keep going back to what does it look like to live in rest?
Oh, yeah. I
It
wanted
looks
you to
like,
talk about that a
oh,
little bit. Can you
oh, how much
explain?
time do we have? Because I just want to
I don't know. I don't have like a. I should have kept a
my,
timer on here, but
my
I do
little
want you
timer's
to.
gone on like it was on the last one. So I'm like, okay, living in rest.
Yeah, I want to hear about that because that is so amazing to me that you've. Because I know you, and I think, wow, if Kim learned how to start operating out of rest, this is a big deal, huh? Because you're like a very high accomplishing person, and I wonder what it would be like to be in that place now where you can operate out of rest.
Well, I think the first somatic body experience I had when I went and got that somatic work, and my body said, I'm tired. I need rest.
Yeah,
And my brain was like, what do you mean you need rest? You get 8 hours a night. You got,
yeah,
got this great CPAP machine now, which is
yeah.
like, it's like I've had a CPAP and I'm the best sleep of my life now. What are you talking about? I got great sleep and I'm not
Oh
working
wow.
a job and I have low stress or whatever. It's like, yeah, you're riddled with trauma, but you don't, whatever. It's like whatever. But it was such a foreign concept to me. It's like, what do you mean you need rest? But I think when I started realizing when I asked my body what it needed, and it said it needed rest. And I asked my soul what it needed, and it was clear as well. I get emotional. It was clear as a bell when I asked my soul what it needed. It said, I need unlimited connection, which it was saying to God, I need limitless connection with God. I think I used the word limitless. And I
Yeah,
went, limitless connection with God. Isn't that out without a frame? Isn't that really literally what it
yeah,
looks like to be without outside the scope of a frame? What does it look like to have unlimited connection and my body was needing rest? And so I think stepping out of church and stepping away from the shame woman, the only thing I knew how to do was to say that thing I'm feeling guilty about right now, oh, somebody invite, oh, there's a church potluck. Oh man, I always used to feel like I needed to be part of that and part of the hospitality, but I'm not even going to go. You want to know why? Because I don't want to. Because I don't have the energy
I
to
don't
go
want
and
to.
I have this much energy right now, and I want to
Yes.
save it for the people that matter to me. And it's choosing the best over what's good. And I'm like, I can go to that
Yeah.
potluck, yeah, but then I'm going to leave drained, and I don't want to do that. I don't
Yeah.
want to go. And so there'd be all these things that would come up, or I'd notice that one of my friends was being a little, you know, being a little like, well, why are you going over there and doing that with her and you're not doing this with me? And I'm like, nah, I'm not playing that game. I don't even, So I just say no and just go, well, that's what I was doing this week. I'm not taking on your guilt. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not taking on the guilt of not being a great friend because you're miffed because I spent more time with another friend than with you. So it was all these little things where I'd go, what's the appropriate good spiritual thing to do? Oh, I should go to that thing. It's like, no, I don't want to go. I want to sit in my room and play crossword puzzles and listen to a podcast. I want to listen to true crime I love good whodunit true crime podcasts. And I used to feel terribly guilty for listening to them. And I'm like, no, I actually want the whodunit. I like the whodunit. So I'm not suggesting everybody go listen to true crime, but it's like I like the mysteries that are solved
Yeah.
and the forensic work. So I probably shouldn't even bring that up because that's probably, but I just decided I'm like, I'm not going to let the shame woman tell me
Right.
that I'm going to go to hell if I listen to a whodunit podcast. So I'm not going to feel guilty about it. So it's
Yeah.
just all these little decisions to not do that. And I think when I chose that, I chose to say, I'd rather sit in a chair and play crossword puzzles or go on, read my Twitter feed and read what bright minds are saying about this subject or that subject. And I'm like, I'd rather do that than go out and be with a bunch of friends one night.
Hmm.
I'm gonna call my quiet brain stuff, like my quiet time. When I say quiet time, my moments alone here in my home, I'm gonna choose to look at those as sacred and say, I just want to relax into life and not feel like all the shoulds, the should woman, you know?
Yeah.
I don't want to be so I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what led to rest because I realized that I spent hours and hours and hours literally doing nothing productive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got into this mode of, okay, if something feels like I'll give you a good friend. I don't know if I'm making any sense in this, but the more I started realizing how much resting my soul looked like not taking on the burdens of being good
Okay.
or or performing in some way so that
Yeah.
some person will have an outcome
Yes.
so that a person will like me or that they'll approve of me or that I'm making sure that I'm being good enough
Yes.
for people. The more I moved away from that, the better. So like my dad my dad's like my it is like turning 88 this year and this month actually.
Wow.
And so he got really sick and then he was in the hospital. So I flew home and one of the things we were looking at is maybe he needs to go into a board and care where there's like a nursing
Yeah.
in the home there and everything.
Right.
And it was super expensive.
Yeah.
But I was told, we were told we found you a placement. We found you this perfect place. It's 15,
Yeah.
it's 5 minutes from my sister's house. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's this such and such a month or whatever. And so but you have to let us know. We'll hold your spot. You've got to put a deposit down, but you've got 5 days to make this decision.
Yeah.
And so instead of going, oh my God, well, we've got to figure this out, blah, 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 I'm like, okay, let's pull together the information that we have and let's talk with this person, let's talk with that person. But in my mind, I knew if I lose that placement in that board and care, that God was just going to provide another one because he's my father and
Mm.
he loves us. And I remember Leonard, my husband, he always used to say, you come you come to the table in a position of strength and always be willing to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ever let anybody put you under duress about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whereas the old Kim would be like, we have 5 days, or this person's going to let that go to another person because it's so
Yeah.
hard to find this thing. And now I go,
Yeah.
no, if I'm loved by my father, then if I lose that spot, there's another one that's going to open up. Like I'm not going to be pressured into somebody else's
Yeah.
window. And I just made a decision out of rest. And my mom said, I wish that we could just bring him home first and see what he's capable of.
Yeah.
And we went, okay, let's do that. And so now he brought him home, he got better, and now he's thriving again
Oh,
for an
wow.
88-year-old man. But it was
That's
like we never
awesome.
needed to go into that home.
Yeah.
But my whole point being, it wasn't, it's not about the story itself. It was about the approach I took.
Yeah.
I
Operating
said,
out of rest.
I'm just going to operate out of knowing that I'm loved, knowing that God's got his hand in everything, knowing that I'm going to win because I've got a father who calls me beloved and says, I've got this. I'm
Yeah.
so,
So I have, unfortunately, we are about to time
all
out
right.
here. So
Anyway, I hope all that, hey, to all of
it,
you guys that are listening, I hope it makes all sense. I hope it
well,
makes sense.
I want to tie a couple of points in here to leave the listeners with two things that just came to mind just because I do early morning devotion on Facebook every day, and we're in the book of Zechariah, and there were two verses that we went through today that really reminded me of what you just said, and I want to leave with those. When you were just describing doing crossword puzzles and listening to, what did you call them? The shows?
True
The
crime podcasts.
true crime podcasts. And I think of Zechariah
It's definitely
14.
a genre. It's a genre. Yeah, yeah, it's a genre, but go ahead.
Yeah, I just real quick here because we're going to run out of time.
Yeah.
But I just read this verse this morning in on our devotion that said, "Even the cooking pots of the house of Yahweh will be as sacred as the sprinkling bowls set before the altar."
Yes.
And so I just want to say amen to the crossword puzzles and the place of rest that you find for your
Mhm.
brain and for your whole being to be on the cooking pot as a sacred place, just like, when they sprinkled the blood on the bowls in the temple, where that actually was considered sacred. But God is saying, well, so's the cooking pot now. We're changing the rules, and I just wanted to leave you
So
with that. And
good.
also that
So good.
I forgot what there was something else that you said. I think I'm just going to let it go because we're running out of time. But there was another point I was going to make. But I have enjoyed this so much, Kim, to talk to you and to hear your story. And I just know that's going to resonate with so many people. And I just invite those of you who listen to comment if you want to encourage Kim at all in the comments. I know she'll be able to access this as well as myself, and just cheer her on for what she's done here today, exposing the journey that she's been on for your sake, not just for her sake or my sake, but really for those of you who have been watching and listening. I know that this has been really invaluable information of how to posture yourself in that time of, do I keep walking this way that's ultimately not going to bring me to health and life in God? And it looks like the journey I'm taking might be kind of different than what people might approve of, but I'm not going to listen to those voices anymore. And I just want to say thank you for taking this time, Kim. I love you. And I know
Right.
I'll see you again on here sometime. I just know God's going to do this again.
Anytime, Laura. I'm happy about your podcast. I'm super excited.
Thank you. All right. Have a good day, everyone. We'll see you next time. There should be outro music here, but I'm not that sophisticated yet. Bye bye.
Ba-dum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum,
Yeah,
bum.
exactly.
Bye.
Bye bye, Kim.